This is Lightning Power Lunch with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli on Lightning Radio.
Oh, if you knew, it would have been easy to fix, but it's just got to be, from the start. You look back, LA, we had a great first. Anaheim, super flat. Jersey wasn't good enough, and obviously in Pittsburgh was one of the worst players we played. So, we got to have better starts, that's for sure. And we can't trust that, Vasi or Joe is going to keep us in it. And, we got a, a one-goal deficit instead of, 2, 3, 4. But, for us to, dig ourselves out of holes like that, it's got to stop. We got to make sure that we just start the game on time and, put ourselves in a better position, because it's frustrating. It's not like, we got out there with, tiptoeing through it. But, we just got to have better starts. That's the bottom line.
It's tough because you cannot guarantee the score. You can sit here and say you had the puck all night, which we did. But the goalie made all the stops he needed to make. And, the scoring is not guaranteed. But you have a big say in, how you defend and how you show up. And, it's unfortunate we just, these 3 games in the road trip, we just didn't show up on time.
Why is that? Why? Let's hope it gets rectified come playoff time.
I have some thoughts.
I want to hear
thoughts as to why.
I want to hear those thoughts as you're back in the saddle.
I'm back in the saddle. Yeah, thanks for covering yesterday.
Yeah, Eric came on and double E, as we call him, from
I do remember one of the last things I said, though, on Tuesday's show was, how as John Cooper put it, we didn't start on time. Hopefully they start on time tonight, and we just heard the sound from Coop that was after the Boston game saying that they didn't start on time. So because I wasn't on the show yesterday, other than if people were listening post-game, you didn't really hear my thoughts about the Boston game. We don't need to spend a lot of time on it. But I actually felt that was the least awful of the 3 first periods the Lightning played on the road trip. I mean, I think the general consensus was the Pittsburgh first period might have been their worst period of the entire year. I'm talking about how they played, not what the score was after the first period. In the New Jersey game, they gave up way more scoring chances to the Devils in that first period than they did to the Bruins in the first period on Tuesday. The problem was that they were down by multiple goals. So unlike the Pittsburgh game, unlike the Jersey game, in this case Vasilevsky wasn't able to hold the other team to only 1 goal.
Right.
And unlike the Jersey game, the Lightning didn't score in the first period. So let's look at the first period and try and determine what happened. The first goal against is a 2-on-1 because Victor Hedman's stick blade goes over the puck. I mean, it's just one of these weird things, and maybe that's just – it kind of fits in with what we said, and I heard a little bit of the show that you did with Eric, and you guys were talking about, or at least you were for sure, Greg. You felt neither team was really on top of it on Tuesday in that Lightning Bruins game. I think that's true, and the Lightning were just – except for a stretch in the second period, they were not crisp in that game. So a game in which your stick blade goes over the puck – because you stick your head up to look to make a play. How often does that happen to Victor Hedman? Maybe, like
handful
1% of the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But it happened in that game, and it hits Coyle's skate and pinballs forward. And then Patra and Frederick team up, and they make a good play in the 2-on-1. And honestly, Radish went down a little early. Forced a late decision from Patra, but Patra was still able to make the play across. So,
and Vasi had a stick out, and the puck goes past the stick. He was looking for the poke. So I didn't think they played that 2-on-1 well either.
Well, it was a 2-on-1, though.
Yeah,
so that was a mistake. It was an odd man rush against. But how many odd man chances did the Bruins have in that first period? I mean, there weren't that many.
Yeah.
The second goal was a little bit of a miscue in coverage. It wasn't a horrendous miscue. Pasternak makes a pretty good play there, cutting to the circle. And look, it's Pasternak. You have to be aware that he can do lots of stuff with the puck.
Yeah.
Wotherspoon gets open enough. That is a great finish. I mean, again, if we're talking percentages in the NHL, which I was like, why are they getting the puck?
I know.
That wasn't Callahan. It was his NHL debut.
Right.
Oh, Witherspoon's played like 70 some odd games, no goals. If
Hell of
he
a
shot
shot.
the puck like that, he would have scored. So what does that tell you? Witherspoon, he made a great shot.
Yeah.
Most times when he tries that shot, though, it's not where it ended
Yeah,
up.
right.
Maybe it misses the net, right? And we see that a lot. So the Bruins took advantage of a couple of chances, and the Lightning didn't do much, honestly, offensively in the first period. So that part I'm down with. But they weren't good enough in the first period. And they weren't good in the first period in any of the 3 games on the trip.
Yeah.
It's just that it's not like the Bruins overwhelmed them in the first period, but they got a lead. What happens at the beginning of the second? Lightning get a 3-on-1 with Hagel coming out of the penalty box. Hedman misses the net. And look, I just mentioned 2 miscues from Victor. I thought he actually was doing everything in his power to pull the Lightning back into the game, and he did finish with a goal and an assist and played a lot, particularly after McDonough took the puck to the face in the third period. It was just one of those nights, right? I give the Lightning credit for kind of willing themselves to a higher level, which they found in the second period, and Swayman was very, very good in the second period. Third period, the Lightning shot volume was high again. It was 16. I'm not sure that they had much push left, though. I thought Swayman had a more routine third period, even though the shot volume was a little bit higher. And, you fall behind 4-0. That's a tough one. I did hear what you said where, if you're tied going into the third or you're up by a goal going into the third and you lose in regulation, you're like, that one stings. This one stings in a different way because you didn't like how the game started, right?
Sure.
You wanted the Lightning to try and cash in and make the road trip a spectacular road trip. But once it's 4-0, that's a tough one to try and get points out of that game.
Right.
So they're back home. So anyway, I said, I have some thoughts. The Lightning have been a good first period team really up until January. And like Victor said, they had a good first period against LA. So it's not like every game in January they've been bad in the first period. They had a good first period against Boston in the home game. They had a good first period, if memory serves, in the home game against Carolina. But they've had bad first periods in Anaheim, LA, Pittsburgh, and Boston. This is related to the schedule, in my opinion. Now, maybe it would affect them later in the game, but we said that this was going to be a grind of a month. And the players are not making excuses. John Cooper's not making excuses. Fans are not experiencing what the players are going through with the travel. Like, I can say to you, Greg, coming back from California 3 time zones away and then, like, jumping right back on the bicycle and playing one home game and then another 3 and 4 and then another 3 and 4 that overlaps with more travel. We got into Pittsburgh at 2 a.m. Like, okay, I'm 55. So, I'm not going out there and playing. But I can tell you, like, I got sick. I'm still, like, trying to get over it. Like, this is a hard month for the Lightning. So if you're watching the team on TV and like, why are they not starting on time? Well, this is what happens. Every team has to go through it. And frankly, I mean, I'm giving you my opinion. Nobody has said this, but this is reasonable to me. This is going to be a survival month. We use that expression, Greg. And it's going to continue because the Lightning have 2 back-to-backs coming up on a road trip next week.
Yep.
It's only when they finish the end of that trip that the schedule is going to start to level out. So look, they're 3-4-1 through 8 games in the month. We said 16 games in 29 days. They're halfway there. It's not going to let up, at least for another week and a half. And, you've got some injuries. You've got, Moser is on his way back, but like McDonough missed the third period, didn't skate this morning. My expectation is because the Lightning haven't made a recall, McDonough's going to play. They just gave him the morning off. We'll see. This is tough, though. Like, it's tough to just go out there and like dictate the action right off the bat when you're digging for energy, which is why I give them credit for digging as deeply as they did in that second period. If not for Swayman, that game could have been closer than 4-2.
Sure.
After 2.
Yeah.
But once it was still 4-2, it's hard to keep pushing like that. we say the full 60, it's very hard, even for 40 minutes, which was going to take that. They were going to have to put forth the same third period that we saw in the second period, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it just wasn't there.
Wasn't in the cards. Braden
That's
points.
my opinion, though, Greg. I mean, you can take it for what it's worth.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think a lot of people feel like at this point, it could be every game the schedule has an impact. You know, maybe some games more than others. I don't know. And then you don't have Braden Point in the lineup. That's also going to hurt.
That
was a
hurt
surprise.
some of their playmaking ability.
For sure. And we talked about it a little bit, and I jokingly asked the question, you know, if this was a playoff game, do you think Braden Point is sitting? And let's hope we don't have to find that
Players
out.
don't usually miss any kind of meetings leading to rule violations in the playoffs. I've never seen it happen, at least under John Cooper's tenure.
And I'm sure Point feels awful about it. You don't want to let your team down, and in some ways that's what it is. But you'd hope that he comes in, a couple of days rest. You know, maybe he's somebody that can really get things going for his team tonight against Anaheim. So I think you're right. I mean, I think that's why it's smart, if you can, to be measured in your emotions when it comes to evaluating this team this season, and really every season, because you have some circumstances that are impacting potentially how the team plays that aren't necessarily on the ice. It's off the ice, and you know your schedule is just demanding, and this is just how it is. So I think the Lightning would do well. You've heard me use this phrase. What does it mean? You can analyze it however you want. Keep that head above water a little bit here while the schedule is pretty crazy, which means just try and munch as many points as you can, knowing that it's going to be a grind, and probably more of an emphasis on home games. You know, if you can, you know, take care
and
of
divisional
that.
games,
And divisional
which
games.
after tonight they're going to be coming up pretty regularly.
And we know they want to do better, particularly in the division. But I think, was there, outside of the slow starts, and if you feel like the slow starts are in large part to the schedule, I'm not saying you feel that way, maybe you do, but there are some who do. I think you have to look at this and say, I'm not going to overreact. I understand what they're up against. I would like to see them start better, but I also understand potentially why they're not. Now, I think if we asked Phil this question, I don't know if Phil would give them.
Phil's not big on excuses.
He
though.
wouldn't give them that pass, and probably, you know, Chief either. You know, I don't know. Yeah, Chief might. I'm not going to put words in their mouths, but I know when the Lightning go out west, Chief would talk about, you know, it's a different animal, you know, early on for sure because of the time change, your body clock, all that fun stuff. But they tend not to make as many excuses that some may when it comes to stuff that is impacting the team. Rightly so, rightly wrong, I don't know. However you want to break that down. I do think the travel's a lot. I do think the condensed schedule's a lot. You know.
It's the intensity of the travel and the frequency of the games. It's the combination. We knew it. I mean, we can talk about it until we're blue in the face. 16 games in 29 nights, 10 on the road, all over the United States. Can you hear Stella drinking her water, by the way? Even she's getting tired and dehydrated hearing about the big dogs tend to drink water very noisily. So I heard it. I don't know if the fans heard it. So I have some good news and some bad news, okay? The good news is more micro. The bad news at this point is more macro, like the overview. So the good news from the micro standpoint is the Lightning's opponent tonight, Anaheim, the Ducks are kind of in the same boat. The Ducks are playing game 5 of a 6-game road trip. It's their longest road trip of the year. Right. And the Lightning are happening to catch Anaheim near the end of that road trip, which has been a bad road trip. They've had one win that they actually got an impressive win. They won in Carolina in overtime. But their other games have all been regulation losses. They've been twice shut out, which I believe are the first 2 times they've been shut out all year. They're coming off a shutout loss in Washington. They got blown out in Philly, which was the Cutter Gauthier return to Philadelphia game, if you know that drama of the sidebar story where Gauthier was drafted by Philadelphia and basically said, I don't want to play for them. So they moved him to Anaheim. That's how they got Jamie Drysdale, the Flyers. But Gauthier had only been to training camp with the Flyers. Like, he was still a college player. So you can imagine the reception he got in Philadelphia for that first game. And the Ducks got absolutely their doors blown off, and they started the trip with a blowout loss in St. Louis. This has been a bad trip for Anaheim, and it's a grind for them right now. So you have two teams that are kind of feeling the brunt of, like, lots of games and lots of travel. So I think that this game is more of a push. I'm not saying the Lightning have an advantage, though, because we spent, much of the day yesterday flying back from Boston. And, how effective is McDonough going to be after taking that puck to the face? I'm sure based on the lack of recall, he's going to play. We'll have to wait and see. But I think it's a better opponent for the Lightning. Not that it's Anaheim, but just that this team has been kind of through the schedule grind right now, too. Detroit's different. Detroit has had a long homestand, and they did very well on it, and they're just starting a trip tonight in Sunrise. So that's the Saturday game. All right, so that's the short-term kind of good news. The bigger picture, if not bad news, less good news, people have listened to the show over the years know I talk about maintaining playoff pace. Get 12 points every 10 games. You're on target to get to 96 points after 80 games with 2 extra games to pad that total. If you get to 96, you should be good. This may be the year where 96 is not enough to get in the playoffs. And the reason I'm saying this, and this is me going 180 degrees in the other direction from where I was a couple of months ago. I was saying 2 months ago, the teams in the Atlantic, other than the teams at the top, have done very little to distinguish themselves. Scratch that. Look at the standings. Look at where Ottawa is. Look at where Detroit is. Look at where Montreal is. Boston still has the disadvantage of games played more, but look at the Bruins' point total. Same as the Lightning. So the Lightning are still in actually okay shape as far as their playoff pace metric. I mean, they need to get going a little bit here in this 10-game segment, but, I mean, they got 49 points. They need to get to 60 points after 50 games. They need 11 points in the next 8. I mean, that's doable. What I'm seeing as a potential problem, though, is that it's not like the best 6 teams record-wise in the East get in the playoffs. In your division, you're only getting a maximum of 5, and that's if you're taking both wild card spots. So I'm placing a little marker here, right now, Greg, January 16th. Let's see where we are in 6 weeks. If Ottawa, Montreal, and Detroit continue to play at the level that they've been playing, not just for a week, not just for 2 weeks, for an extended period of time, this is going to get pretty dicey in the Atlantic. So it would behoove the Lightning certainly to maintain their playoff pace and certainly to take care of business in their divisional games. Their record is not good within the division, now 2-6. But still, they haven't played Detroit yet. Sure. They've only played Ottawa once. They've only played Montreal once. They haven't played Buffalo, right? So, I mean, they have some games to play here in the Atlantic, but how can you ensure that some of these teams stay behind you, take care of business in the divisional games? I know that's not really as related to tonight's game because it's against Anaheim, but, I've been impressed. Every time I look up, Ottawa's winning, getting points, right? Detroit won, 7 in a row? They had a bad home loss. Let's see how they bounce back now. I mean, they certainly got a boomerang from the coaching change. There's no question.
Sure.
And I got to give Montreal props. Montreal has been winning. They've been winning at home. They've been winning on the road. Quality wins. Beating Colorado in Colorado, beating Vegas in Vegas, beating the Lightning in Tampa. They just went out to Utah and rallied and won a game in regulation. Beat Vancouver at home. They're taking care of their business.
Yeah.
That's why the Atlantic Division is so tight. Anyway, I threw a lot at you there. When you give me 2 days to think about stuff.
Got a lot to say.
Before the show, yeah. I pretty
You
much
got a lot to say.
unwound now.
Look, we've been
So,
waiting for Ottawa to arrive. I'm not telling you they are, but maybe
I
they're going
agree.
to make a push.
Yeah.
Maybe they're going to make a push. Montreal, time will tell. They play hard. I think that's one thing you and I have talked about over the years with them, at least with Marty. You know you're going to be in for a scrap, and maybe they're going to start to elevate. What's helping those teams, Dave? The rest of the East, the traditional powers, there's maybe more uncertainty there, and I think it's going to give some of these teams, multiple teams, maybe an opportunity towards the end of the year to potentially get in.
And the other part of that equation is Florida is kind of stumbling and bumbling,
Or wobbly.
a little bit, and
John
Toronto
Tavares is
in
week
a
to
little bit
week.
of a losing streak. Yeah, it's not like the top of the division
Yeah.
has vaulted, like one or two teams vaulting way ahead also. So as much as the Lightning have to be wary of the teams directly behind them, there is an opportunity for them with a good stretch here to potentially pass Florida and or Toronto. But a lot of it's going to come down to these head-to-heads, honestly,
Yeah.
Greg.
And let's face it, too. I mean, I made this point. I know we don't want to go there all the time. I just keep an eye on where the Lightning finish. And if you do believe in seedings and matchups, does it matter a little bit more this year? Understanding you have some teams who are traditionally pretty good that are a little wobbly, but could they turn it on when the time is right and catch you in a bad circumstance in that first round? We'll talk more about that, obviously, as we get closer. I'm just telling you right now, it is a little befuddling, and you wonder if, Florida is that part of, I want to say schedule, but really the schedule over the last year. When you have that long run and now you're coming back and, their schedule may not be where they'd like it to be in terms of games played and winning. And is that going to have an effect? I mean, we've seen that all the time. Teams that go far or win the cup or the runners-up, that next year in the regular season can be really tough to get through. But then they find a way, like once they get in, because they've been there, it's almost like the light switch goes on a bit. And it's like, okay, we're ready. We just had to get there. But this could be the year where you see teams like an Ottawa, maybe a Montreal, Columbus. I mean, they're hanging around.
I mean, there's some Metro teams that are hanging in there too. I mean, Buffalo is way back, certainly.
I mean, the Rangers, that's a surprise.
Yeah, and they're going to have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Because they're going to have to jump teams. Let me just ask you this, though, Greg, because
Sure.
I think when you have said it would really help the Lightning to finish first to avoid seeing Florida in the first round and seeing, let's be honest, an experienced playoff team in Toronto in the first round. I think that's where you're going with it, right? Like, you'd rather see them face a different opponent. Especially Florida. You don't want to see them see Florida because
So they would face Columbus today.
Well,
Like,
right.
If the Lightning finished first in their
if
division.
they finish first.
and
And
Washington
I'm
may
kind
be
of
that
with
pace.
you. I kind of think Florida will they will get recharged when the playoffs begin. But there is no guarantee, based on what I just spelled out, that if the Lightning finish first or some other team finishes first, that, let's just say if the Lightning finish first, there's no guarantee that Florida and Toronto are going to be second and third.
Sure.
Like, I mean, these
you're right.
teams are close enough.
That's
It's
fair.
going to take some work, but we might see one of these other teams get into second or third. And would that change your thinking? Are you really saying, given the choice, you would rather see a team that is new to the party rather than a team that is a seasoned playoff team? Florida falls into that category, and Toronto does too, even
I
though
would
Toronto
say-
has not had a lot of success in the playoffs.
Maybe how I should have phrased it, I would, because you should never assume. If you think the top three in the Atlantic are going to be a combination of Toronto, Tampa Bay, and Florida, I would rather not face Florida or Toronto in the
Right.
first round.
And I'm kind of saying, well, what if that is not the case?
Well, then let the chips fall.
This
where
is
they may.
not Washington and New Jersey in the Metro where they are so far ahead
Sure.
than kind of the middle of the pack. The middle of the pack in the Atlantic kind of is the pack.
It is.
It is the pack.
Yeah, it is.
I
is.
mean,
For sure.
the Lightning are 3 points back of Florida with 3 games in hand. It's going to take a little work.
It's incredible, really, when you think
But
about it.
yeah, I mean, And look at all these teams that are right behind the Lightning. I understand the Lightning have games in hand, but they don't have like 4 or 5 games in hand on the teams behind them. They have like 1 and 2 games in hand.
Sure.
So
No doubt.
they need to make sure that they keep adding
They
points
do.
to their total.
They do.
Keep
which
munching.
Which is why, you mentioned the schedule. It's a little bit of the X factor in preventing them or allowing them maybe to munch more points than they typically would had the schedule not be so condensed. Did you have any more thoughts play-wise? We talked about Geeky, coming back. I want to say, did we do the show with Gonsalves and
Yeah,
your thoughts? I think we did. We did. Yeah,
I know.
yeah,
I
okay.
talked
We
about
got
that.
into that. Okay.
He did clear waivers. We didn't know if he was gonna get through waivers.
What did you
last
think of
time we
Finley?
Talked.
I don't think did I have a chance to talk to you about Finley?
No,
And he,
it was
6'6".
It was a weird game
Yeah.
because the Lightning, I didn't think were really on top of things, and they did. I mean, I don't have the final minutes in front of me, but they did lean on like their top guys a lot, right? Because they were down in the game. But look, it's a great experience for him. NHL debut. He's had a tough go of it because he's had a lot of injury problems, both as an amateur and as a pro, including this year. Like he missed all of training camp. And he wasn't even on our radar, Greg, when we were talking about who might they call up. We were talking about like Logan Brown and Ullinen. And like we haven't really talked much about Groshev because I don't think he's really having a major impact this year in Syracuse where, I mean, he could have been an option, except he doesn't play center and they needed somebody, I guess you could say Point was out, so they needed a center, and Finley is a center. But look, it's a great experience for Finley. I mean, it's clear that he was called up because Point was going to be suspended by the team, and they needed a forward, and presumably they wanted a center. But it tells you where the organization views him. So hopefully he can build on this. He's a big guy. He knocked over a couple of the Bruins. So he had a chance in the third period at the side of the net. That was good to see.
It never hurts to get those feet wet at the NHL level, but I made the comparison and more just because of the size. I have no idea if it's going to play out. You might have heard on the show about could he be like a Stahl type on a third line who's really just can skate, can play defense. Maybe there's some offense there, but just this big body
and got the pedigree. I know we had that conversation whenever it was about children of former NHLers, but his dad did play in the NHL. Unlike the Dvorak miscue, I actually went back and looked it up, and like apparently when Dvorak first was drafted or something, like he was mistakenly associated with Radek Dvorak, and they're like, no, this guy was born
it's
in
a
Ohio.
common thing to think about.
Yeah,
I mean,
Dvorak. Who knows? Dvorak in Czech might be like Brown in the U.S., right?
That's true.
But Jack Finley's dad, Jeff Finley, actually, when he was with the Flyers organization, played a year in Hershey when I was there.
Good player.
I do remember. He was a defenseman. Yeah,
good player.
He played quite a few games in the NHL.
I think he played over 700.
Yeah,
looking at the numbers.
Quite a few, right?
Yeah, right.
So this was near the beginning of his. Was it the beginning of his career? I guess it would have been.
Was it along with Eric
Jack
Ferrer?
is what, 22?
Yeah.
This would have been mid-90s. So, look, whether it's DNA or opportunity or, by opportunity I mean resources, which was a point that one of the fans made about, some of these high-level hockey players getting the opportunity because, their family can afford to pay for it, but also the individual tutelage, right? Like, dad is going to show you how to position your body, even though Jack and Jeff play different positions.
Right.
So good luck to Jack. I mean, I hope that he uses this as a springboard for the rest of the season, because I'm sure it wasn't a lot of fun to have to do rehab for the first 2 months of the season.
And, I feel like the Lightning, or maybe other organizations do this, but I feel like the Lightning do a really good job of rewarding players who are doing well.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a game, you don't think that's going to motivate him to try and get back and play pretty well. So I commend them for that. Our buddy Jim from Jacksonville said, partner, after the game, more of a strategy question. He said, after Carlos' penalty in the third, Vasi was pulled to create a 6-on-4. Although I agree with the sixth attacker, I believe one of the defensemen should have been somewhat deep near our goal, almost like a prevent defense in football. until the Lightning gained possession, or keep Vasi in goal until the Lightning had possession? Thank you.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, one that I was pondering in the moment as the Lightning were getting ready for that power play, because I didn't know if they would actually go with the 6-on-4. I believe there were about 3.5 minutes left.
Yeah, there were.
And, I mean, the Lightning, it was their first power play since the New Jersey game. I mean, that was the other part of it. They didn't get a power play against Pittsburgh. They didn't get a power play against Boston until very late in the game. And their power play is good enough to score 5-on-4. And if you figure they are going to score 5-on-4, if you're hoping that they're going to score 5-on-4, and you don't even take the chance to have the Bruins score an empty netter, you're going to have about 1:30 or more to get the tying goal, because you needed 2. But it's not like the power play started with like 1:40 left. I mean, there were 3.5 minutes left. So it was a little bit of a coin toss. So Coop decided to go with the 6-on-4. All right. If you're going to do that, Jim's question was, shouldn't there be kind of a safety valve player back there? Or have Vasilevsky almost halfway out, right, to see if you win the faceoff. They wanted the 6 players in the offensive zone.
They were all in.
What happened on that play, it was kind of a weird faceoff because Lindholm wins it. He's a righty. Usually if a righty wins the faceoff in the defensive zone, on the strong side, the puck's going to go into the corner or behind the net. Instead, somehow it went straight to the middle of the ice, and Peak has a straight shot to the net. He still has to execute it, right? But because they're shorthanded, he can fire away. There's not going to be icing. And he put it right in the middle of the net. The odds of that happening directly off a faceoff on that side of the ice with a right-handed centerman,
very slim, right?
It's just slim the way the puck went to the middle of the ice. You don't see that very often. The Lightning have the 2 extra players as well. And if it's a 50-50, they should come up with it. They are outnumbering the Bruins around the circle. So I think when you're thinking as a coach, like, what are the odds that we're going to get possession? Pretty high. If we don't get possession, what are the odds that the Bruins are going to have a shot to the net? Very low.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe it's in the corner and they rim it. Maybe it gets out of the zone. We can't hold it in. We'll have a chance to regroup. So they tried it. It backfired. I mean, it was a shame because I would have liked to have seen what they could do with the 6-on-4 when it was still 4-2. But, then it became 5-2, and the Bruins got to play their goal song a couple more times because they scored 2 into the empty net.
Sure. I didn't have a problem either. I mean, Coop, we've seen him do stuff like that.
He's
I
pretty
know,
aggressive with the goalie pull.
Yeah, and I know some people will cite the analytics and say that's just really a low-risk play. But I think when you pull your goaltender anyways, it's low risk. I just, in general, whether it's 1:40 or whether it's 3.5. I
down 4-2 with 3.5 minutes left, even with the power play, the odds were pretty long that the Lightning were going to get back.
I didn't have a
game.
problem with it. I think he actually probably takes more heat for how he doesn't use timeouts than anything like.
And he used a timeout
he
there.
Did. So,
yeah. I was thinking about our fan. I can't remember who was always going
know.
on about, why does John Cooper never call a timeout? I'm like, hey, he called timeout.
He did. I'm waiting for you on the broadcast. And
well, they didn't have
a fan.
They didn't have point, so maybe part of it was this is how we're going to work the 6-on-4 without breaking point. So it might have been a little bit of strategy.
I wanted to get your thoughts because, at least in this setting, I know how you felt during the call when Lillberg had to drop the gloves.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just Eric and I talked about it, and he said, how did he phrase it? That maybe he was surprised, and I said, I wasn't surprised. Of course Lillberg was going to have to answer for that. Not that he did anything wrong. It's just, Dave, this is the mindset in today's NHL. You have a big hit, you've got to fight.
I've never seen this though before, and I wish I would have had time. I mean, I don't know about time. I didn't talk to anyone on the Boston side about like why the entire team was so riled
vitriol
up
towards this guy.
About how that play at the end of the game last week unfolded, because I think even the most neutral of observer would look at that Kastelik Lillberg play and say, Kastelik went looking for trouble, found it, and got injured. Lillberg was protecting himself first with the stick. Probably shouldn't have been a major. And then he's in a fight. In a fight, his opponent ended up getting hurt.
Yeah.
Why should Lillberg have to answer for that? This is different than the big check. This is also different than Lillberg initiating the fight against Kastelik at the end of a game where the outcome is no longer in doubt, initiating the fight against someone who's not really interested in fighting and then injuring that player. That's different. That I can understand. But for the Bruins to be holding Lillberg accountable for defending himself and in the course of defending himself, hurting one of their teammates make no sense to me. But at the time, I thought it actually added some juice
It did.
to the Lightning's game.
They played better after that.
Yeah. And I mean,
Yeah.
the Bruins had their reasons for doing this. Frederick's pretty tough. Like, we've seen him fight.
Yeah, he can throw.
But he was like, this is happening.
Yeah.
And I haven't really seen that before. I
It
mean,
had to have been.
when somebody delivers a check that injures the other player, and like, let's say in the next meeting, the player that got injured challenges the player that hit him, okay, that happens. This, not so much. But it happened in the Boston game, and I thought it actually helped the Lightning.
It
and
did.
Lillberg did not win that fight. Like, he took some punches, but he did pop Frederick at the end. Frederick's helmet came off. He hung in there
Well,
and answered the bell. And I
That's
don't
all
know
you
if the
can do.
Bruins players are saying, well, you know, the kid answered for what he did, which is ridiculous. Because what he did was defend himself against the guy who's charging him with 2 seconds left in a game that you're about to win 4-1.
I'm trying to get
And then
reason.
reciprocated when that guy dropped the gloves and wanted to fight.
I agree with you. And I think if you're Boston, you woke up the bear, so to speak. Because, I mean, luckily they were up as much as they were, because I think you're right. The Lightning, something clicked there. And sometimes a fight can do that. The fights that are staged, I'm not a big fan of. A fight like that, I'm not
Yeah.
a big fan of. But it certainly woke the Lightning up. I'm wondering, and Dave, I'm trying to reason. I don't know what was in their minds. I don't know if anybody asked them after the game. My sense is they went after Lillberg because there was an injury the previous game to the player that went after.
Right.
That's the only reason I can think, like, they were so hell-bent on getting him. And to his credit, the other thing too is there's something to be said for do you think, and again I'm spitballing. We can't get in Emil's mind here. I wonder if in the back of his mind before the game, if he thought they were going to be targeting him the way they did. Because, like, mentally you can get prepared.
Yeah.
Like, I got to be ready for this, and if I got to drop the gloves, all right, I'm going to do it. And maybe that was part of it. But part of me wonders too, like, did he even suspect he was going to have to drop the gloves?
I don't know. Maybe there's chatter during warm-ups too. I mean,
yeah, there could be. There could be.
It's hard to know what's going on the ice. I think you're right. I think the Bruins were upset because Kastelik got hurt, but sometimes players do get hurt in fights.
Well, that's his fault. I mean, but
in this case, yeah, it was his
Yeah,
fault.
I
Because
mean,
he
like-
could have just let time expire
right.
and not made that decision at the end of the game. But
Whatever.
he did. So, I mean, it's going to be a little while until the teams meet again. And, I mean, there was the Zadorov-Chernak fight that was a shorter fight, and there were some post-whistle scrums. But I'm not sure that game had the same level of nastiness to it that the first meeting did. And honestly, the Bruins looked tired too. I mean, if that's the right way of describing how the Lightning looked, they just lacked some pizzazz. And their execution, like, guys were fumbling pucks and just not executing particularly crisply. But I don't think the Bruins were either, honestly. So I still maintain they're going to have to play a lot better in the second half, which is less than a half now for them because they're farther along in their schedule than they did in the first half. They are kind of like the Lightning, though, in that they have knocked out a lot of their long-distance travel. It's not that they don't have a lot of road games left. They do, but I think they've done the Western Canadian trip. They've done the California trip. They've done Utah. I know that. So that may play to their advantage a little bit in terms of the schedule. They also have fewer games, so they will have more time to rest, more time to practice, but they just haven't played well enough to give themselves the kind of point cushion that they need when everybody has games in hand on you, and the division is as tight as it is this year.
Al says, in all the years you've watched the Lightning, have you ever seen the team purposely play with only 21 players? One has to wonder if JBB has something big cooking.
I can't remember them, not play with 21 players, but have a roster of 21 players when you're allowed to have 23. I think they've done 22 for part of a season.
Yeah.
It's probably not the coach's preference. I think Coop would probably like to have, not that it's ideal to sit someone, but sitting someone can serve a purpose if you're the head coach, and, it gives you different options that maybe you wouldn't have. You definitely wouldn't have as many options if you're only, having 21 players, or is the case right now, 20. Because Moser is the 21st.
Sure.
I don't know that Julian has something, quote unquote, up his sleeve, but what he's certainly doing is creating a little bit of room for down the road. Down the road being leading up to the trade deadline.
Correct.
So if the Lightning are able to do a deal and complete that deal because they have created some cap room, then doing this 21 on the roster to 22 on the roster to this point this year, more than half a season, I guess after tonight it'll be more than half a season. Well, actually, we are past half the season, right? 42 games.
Yep.
It will have been worth it. But I think that's the reason.
Yeah, there's a strategy involved. Al also says Finley did well in his first game, 60% on the faceoff circle, +1. Hope he gets a few more games. He has all the tools, just needs a chance. Finley, Geeky, Howard could be a dynamic line in the near future. Well, that's assuming all three of those guys make the team together, and that's assuming all three of those guys play with one another. But I will meet halfway. We have talked about the Lightning doing a pretty good job of at least building and replenishing that system, where there may be some options here, partner, down the road that can help complement the stars who are currently tied into long-term deals. So I agree. But it's, I think I've noticed this covering sports, partner, all these years for different leagues, that everybody gets excited about the minor league system because it's all about using your imagination. It's all about your imagination.
You're a Pittsburgh Pirates fan
and
who's
projecting.
Reading Baseball Prospects America,
or Baseball America, and they say, well, the Pirates have the number 5th ranked farm system. And if Chad Hermanson, if Aramis Ramirez, if J.J. Davis, if all of these guys make it to the majors and all of them get to their star potential, well, yeah, the Pirates are going to be really good. But you know what? What you find out, it doesn't happen all the time. But if you get maybe 2 of those players out of like your top 10 that actually make the team and have an impact, that's considered a pretty good system. Because whether you agree with it or not, a lot of these guys aren't going to make an impact. They're just not. It's not the Lightning. It's littered all over different teams, different leagues.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard. That's why you want options. The more you throw at the wall, a few more of those are going to stick. And I think the Lightning are starting to get there. Anthony says quite a few teams were sleeping yesterday as well. Looks like the dog days of the season started. Top names before the trade deadline, in my opinion. Salary 50% retained. Gord, $2.5 million. Jason Zucker, $2.5 million. Ryan O'Reilly, 2 years, $2.25. And he has in parentheses, big price. And Boomer Fitzpatrick near Ryan O'Reilly.
Those numbers might be a little out of the Lightning's range unless there's some other component to the deal. Like, Lightning fans would do a happy dance if Yanni Gord came back to the Lightning, because it looks like Seattle is going to have a tough road and a narrow road to get into the playoffs in the West. and he is on an expiring contract. But is the Yanni Gourde from 3 years ago the same guy that is playing on the ice right now? And that's something I can't answer that question. That's something that the scouts are looking at. I like Zucker. I mean, Zucker's always been
he's a good player.
Pretty good player. You know, he's been with a variety of teams, some better teams, some worse teams.
Yeah.
Plays fairly consistently. I don't know.
His game
would I maintain, Greg, and I'll just say this and then take the floor.
Yeah.
The position where you're probably going to have the most choice at the deadline, depth forward.
Yeah.
I think those guys, I don't know if Ryan O'Reilly's a depth forward, but I would put Zucker and Gourde in the depth forward category and maybe in the higher end of the depth forward category. But there are going to be players moved who fall into that category for sure.
Zucker is a high-end, I don't want to say role player, but maybe I'll say that because he's a 20-goal scorer. Mm-hmm. He plays with snarl. You love him, the way he's got good wheels. His thing is if he can stay healthy. That was kind of the knock when he was with Pittsburgh, but his last year, he was really, really good in Pittsburgh. Yanni, you know what you're going to get. I don't know offensively if you're going to get the same level of production at this point in his career. Not that he's an old man by any stretch, but there's a lot of wear and tear on that body.
He's actually younger than what I thought he was older than what he was.
Is he 31? He's like 32?
Yeah, no, he's older than that. I think he may have just turned 33.
Okay.
I'm looking at his birthday right now. So, yeah, he just turned 33 in mid-December.
He would be a perfect bottom six, no doubt, or middle six. I've heard people throw that around. And, you know, with John Cooper, you know what you get with Yanni Gourde. You don't have to really worry about effort.
No.
You know what you're going to get from him, and I think there's a certain security blanket that you get with guys
I'm looking
like
at Zucker right now. So Zucker is 34. He actually turned 33 today. Happy birthday, Jason Zucker.
There you go.
So look, this is pretty good. This is a pretty good season he's having in Buffalo. 33 points in 44 games.
That is. That's really good.
So, look, I mean, it's possible the Sabres are like, we like this guy.
Yeah.
The playoffs may not be in the cards this year for us, but we want to keep him.
Who can you give us?
Even if he's on an expiring contract, they may try and get him re-signed.
Who can you give us to acquire Zucker? And the Lightning just may be like, all right, well, who do we have in our mind?
Yeah.
That might be one of those moves. I would think Buffalo wants prospects or young players in return. That's my sense. Somebody who's almost NHL ready. Maybe he's not your top prospect, but somebody that you've seen come up and have a little taste and is still young enough that there's some upside. And you have cost control for a few years. I'd make that deal. I like Jason Zucker a lot. I would take Zucker and then Gourde. That would kind of be, if you're asked my wish list, because I think Zucker can give you some of that punch offensively. I actually think that's what they need.
Yeah.
But that's a wish list. I understand that. Anthony also says, if Point missed a meeting before playoffs to sign a game, he'd be sitting two? Strange decision
that was
in
your
my mind.
question.
Strange decision in my mind, sit him next game. What's the punishment for half the team? They slept through half the game too. Well, you know.
Look, the fans may not be a fan. That's a lot of fans. Fans may not be wild about a coach's team rules, but John Cooper is nothing if not consistent about enforcing these team rules.
Yeah.
If a player misses a meeting in advance of a game, the player sits.
In the regular season.
It's never happened to the best of my knowledge in the playoffs.
Or we don't know if a player missed a meeting in the playoffs because everybody's
But it's not like
this
is some mystery to the players either.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a player
taking responsibility for your actions, right?
That is true. And I think, look, I think it should be a rule for any walk of life that you're in, is that there needs to be accountability. It's okay to have accountability. You know, leaders are born of accountability. You know, hey, my bad. I'll suffer the consequences. And you know what stinks is my team that I let down. And I'm sure that's what Braden Point feels like.
If you need more sleep, you can sleep in the meeting. Just make sure you attend the meeting. You're not suspended
I thought you were going to
if
say
you
if
actually fall asleep in the meeting.
I thought you were going to say if you need more sleep, go to Greg's house, but that's not the case because you're not getting sleep.
I
Michael
wonder,
says,
I wonder how many athletes do fall asleep in these meetings, particularly where they're in those big auditoriums with the screen and they dim the lights, right?
probably a lot.
Oh, yeah.
More than we think. More than we think. Michael says, Greg, I was very disappointed in 21. Leaders must lead by example. Congratulations to Finley on his first NHL game. He showed well. 3 for 4 in the faceoffs, had a shot on goal. Bolts have to find a way to start on time to be able to munch points. Lillberg is afraid of no one.
Yeah. Well, he packed a lot into that post.
He did.
So let me address the starting on time and why I think that this is tied to what's going on with the schedule, because that's what I said. Is my opinion. Nobody's said this. But if the Lightning have had hiccups through the year with poor first period play, I might not have felt as strongly about this as I have. And in fact, not so much this year, but at points this year, but certainly in past years, we've talked about them struggling in the second period, right?
Yeah.
With the period of the long change and guys get stuck out there, or, they don't execute to get a line change. Other teams take advantage, et cetera, et cetera. The Lightning, right now, they've fallen out of first, but they are still in second place in first period goal differential, plus 15. And that's after they've taken a little bit of a hit in January in that regard. It has not just been okay for the Lightning this year. It has been a downright strength of theirs. In fact, there have been games where they've played, by far their best period has been the first period. We're boy, they had a great start and they couldn't, sustain it, which, again, it's hard to play at a super high level and then just keep rolling right along. Those games are rare. So what has changed? It's not the personnel, right? It's not the quality of the opponent. Lightning, whoever had that, their strength of schedule in the first 2 months of the year was maybe the hardest in the NHL. They played a lot of the top teams, particularly in the West, in those first couple of months of the regular season. Their first periods were just fine. So what is it? What's changed? The travel, the schedule, the grind. Wash, rinse, repeat. Get on the plane. Get into the wee hours of the morning. Get up, warm-ups, play. And the other team might be like Pittsburgh was ready to be shot out of a cannon in that game because they had taken one on the chin, 5-0 the previous day. They were ticked. And the Lightning were looking for their legs and couldn't find them, I think. I don't think this is going to be an all second half of the year problem. But in the short term, they do need to figure it out. And hopefully they can start better against Anaheim tonight than, frankly, they did in Anaheim, which was another second half of a back-to-back where they played less than 24 hours the night before and Anaheim hadn't. So tonight the teams are kind of on equal footing. They both played 2 nights ago. They both lost 2 nights ago. Anaheim is nearing the end of a very long, tough road trip. Let's see what happens. McDonough is in tonight. By the way, I didn't mention that. Coop confirmed that McDonough is in.
And Steven mentioned, looks like the power play units may be a little bit different.
That's interesting. So as you can see, I'm not at the rink today. I am trying to get healthy and other stuff. So I just figured it was best if I just go in for the game tonight. So I didn't actually see how they ran these power play units, but they are different. So Point and Gensel and Kucherov on the one unit are with Chafee and Radish. Mm-hmm. People might say, well, what is going on there? Well, what is going on there is with Point at the left circle, Chafee in the bumper, Radish at the point. Kucherov at the right circle now has 3 options for one-timers. He can go across the point at that Stamkos spot. He can go to Radish at the point for a one-timer. And he can go to Chafee in the bumper for a one-timer. Now, they had Chafee on the power play. I think it was in that home loss to Montreal. And They ended up having the puck on the other side of the ice, so, I mean, it actually neutralized what Chaffee could do in the bumper. I have a feeling if they go with that unit, it is going to run through Kucherov. And if Kucherov can get the puck away, any one of those three guys can fire a one-timer. The second unit, because the Lightning have used a lot of the righties on this one unit, the second unit, with Kucherov out there again, you might be like, well, why is Kucherov on both units? It's not unheard of. I mean, Alex Ovechkin plays the full 2 minutes, right? I mean, if I'm remembering right, I think Crosby stays out for much of the power play, no matter what unit is out there. So, look, Kuch can handle it. Kuch does help with the transporting of the puck up the ice, but he conserves his energy in terms of how he moves around the ice. I think, and oftentimes he just stays out anyway. If they get the second unit out there, Kucherov just doesn't come off the ice. So the way they ran it, he is on both units. The second unit, Hagel and Hedman from the other unit are now on this unit with Paul and Cirelli. So you've got 5 lefties on that unit. I don't know if they're going to put Kucherov on the other side for that unit. Maybe, maybe not. I wasn't there to see how they ran it. But Kucherov on the left, now you got Hedman open for the one-timer. Whoever is in the bumper, whether it's Hagel, Paul, or Cirelli, or whomever, they are available for a one-timer. And the guy at the other circle is also available for a one-timer. Let's see if it plays out that way. They could just keep Kucherov at the right.
Yeah.
But no player is going to be available for a one-timer.
No.
With that particular unit, with 5 lefties.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good point.
But you've got guys who can score, and you've got guys who can shoot the puck hard.
You do. You got some
Hedman
options.
can shoot the puck hard. Paul can shoot the puck hard.
Paul can, for sure.
Hagel can score from distance. Kuch himself. Kuch is available for a one-timer at the right circle, but it would be a give and go, right?
Correct.
Like the puck would have to come back to Kucherov, and there has to be an opening there. So, of course, the Lightning need to get a power play.
That would help. That would help.
2 games, and they got 1 at the end of the Boston game, and that was it. So
let's end with a couple of questions here on YouTube, partner. We've got T. Harley87 says they can absolutely overtake Toronto and Florida, but it depends on which team shows up. The team seems very bipolar. They can go toe-to-toe with anyone at times.
Bipolar is too strong of a word based on how they've played this year. I mean, just like we said, the Bruins metrics are pretty rough, and I think the Bruins are going to have to improve just how they are playing. They're going to have to play better. I know that's very simplistic, but when you are minus 20 whatever in goal differential, you've got some problems. You're going to have to correct that. Score more, allow less. The Lightning are the exact inverse of that. They are one of the best goal differential teams in the NHL. Their 5-on-5 play has been very solid. Their special teams still both in the top 10. So bipolar, like over an 82-game season, you're going to have stretches when, or games or periods when things are not happening the way you want them to, and the other team gets a vote. Compounding matters is this particular month, which, as we've said many times, is going to be, it may be the hardest month this year for the Lightning in terms of the schedule. I understand what I said about the teams coming up behind the Lightning, and they've put themselves in a position to be in the running for sure. But I will kind of fall back on this. If the Lightning deliver a second half similar to how they played in the first half, I am confident saying that they are going to get in the playoffs. And I think they will actually have a higher point total than what they had in the first half, assuming they can replicate what they did in the first half. And replicating what they did in the first half doesn't mean that they aren't going to have some bad games here and there. That comes with the territory. But I've liked their season, honestly. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but
no, I mean,
would you term them as bipolar, which kind of means like Jekyll and Hyde, or really good and then really awful, and that's just a seesaw going back and forth.
I think when you're mostly in the top 10, right, defensively and offensively, there's a lot of consistency to your game. I think the goaltending's been pretty good. I know we are looking at the starts, and maybe we are conflating that a little bit, but I look at the metrics, at least in the key categories for Tampa Bay, and it would suggest they've been a pretty consistent team. You Serious 23, I think, from YouTube. I think the loss to Boston was big. A win would have given them up a 4-point gap. Now we're even with games in hand. That doesn't guarantee we get points in those games.
No, that's true.
Yeah, that's true. For sure.
Phil really pointed to that first game against Boston as big, but he acknowledged
really
both
did.
games were big. The Lightning could have helped themselves with a regulation win, but it didn't happen. They're still in a better position than Boston.
Yeah.
Because they have a higher points percentage. But yes, the games in hand are not a guarantee that you're going to get points out of those games in hand. Having said that, playing 4 games and getting no points does not happen very often to the Lightning. In fact, it's happened only once this year.
Yeah.
4 consecutive games. I know they're not going to
Correct.
make up these games in hand all at once, but
For sure. Well, we've got the game tonight. We'll talk to Phil tonight. 7 o'clock, puck drops, pregame's at 6:30, and then we'll be in this setting tomorrow, recapping what transpired and looking to the weekend. Partner, great job. As always, good to have you back in the saddle.
good to be back. Talk to you tonight.
All right. Thanks to Steve Versnick, Jared Johnston, everybody who listened. I'm Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch right here on Lightning Radio.